So in this video I'm going to try to answer two questions. The first one is, are technical strikers really dead? And the second one is the shooting stat capped? So, since the introduction of Daisy in the first patch of the game, long shots were nerfed, and especially characters who had high technique but low shooting were the most affected by this change. Since you could no longer have high technique and have a good percentage of goals, long shot goals, getting to the net. That left characters like Daisy and Luigi out of the meta, since they don't really have a lot of shooting, but they have a lot of technique. One of the main reasons why I'm doing this video is because I remember that when the first update came out, there is a certain content creator called Toons Balloons that made the most effective build in his opinion and didn't got a lot of shots into the net. Then I picked up the game and tried to do some Daisy builds to try to make her a good far range shooter. And by doing so, I started to notice that there was a pattern for the builds that did get a lot of shots into the net and the ones that didn't. I started to notice that when I did a build that had 13 shooting but high technique, the goals weren't very likely to go into the net. But when I did a build that had 14 shooting and high technique, there was a big jump between the amount of goals that it can get into the net. So to test if my theory is right, I'm going to grab a few builds that have 14 shooting with high technique and other ones that have 13 shooting with high technique and see if there's a big jump between them. So the 14 shooting builds that I'm going to show in this video are, first, this all-around striker Luigi, then the speech that I don't really did a test for, but it's very similar to this Waluigi build, so yeah, I bet it's the same as this one. And lastly, I'm going to show you one of the builds that I show you in my best Daisy builds, if you want to check that out. So if my theory is right, 14 shooting should be pretty decent when it comes to shooting from out far. So let's start with the all-around striker Luigi build that I showed you at the beginning. This build actually performed the worst out of the 3 builds of 14 shooting that I'm going to show you. But actually in real game, I think he was the best at scoring from out far, although his results in this exact test weren't the best. Like, don't get me wrong, they are decent and are better than what most people would expect from a striker that has high technique these days. But you know, they weren't the most impressive ones. He made 14 out of 43 shots, which is 32% of his shots. But I generally think that in that test that I showed you first, it was an unlucky game probably, because outside of that test, he actually performed quite well. Out of all the builds that I show you today, I think this one was the most consistent, hitting these long-range shots from passes. So I wouldn't get driven by the test that I show you, because it mostly gives us a general idea of how much goals it makes into the net, but it's not entirely accurate with the percentages. Now let's continue with the 14 shooting Waluigi. And let me tell you that this build actually surprised me. It scored the most goals in the test, scoring 21 out of 49, which is actually very good. If you do not really believe that all these numbers that I'm showing you are, the best, well, you should watch this video for Tones Balloons, because in that video he goes over all, a lot of different Rosalina builds, and most of them score around the same as this Waluigi did, and the Daisy that I'm going to show you next did also. So yeah. And I know that I already have mentioned Tones Balloons, but he used to make a lot of high quality Strikers content, so I will suggest you to watch him. Now, I know that I've said that I was going to show you the test on the Daisy build, but I redid the test, and since I am stupid, I deleted the clips before I used them. I don't really want to redo the test again, so I will just show you a screenshot of my best Daisy build videos, where it says that she did 19 out of 49 shots, which is like around 38% of her shots, which if you want to see the test, you could go watch my video on the best builds for Daisy. And as I said, she did 19 out of 49 shots, which is 38%, which is basically the same amount of shots that the Rosalina builds that Tones Balloons showed in his video did. Around 38% of the shots. And the good thing about these builds is that not only they do a fair amount of shots from the midfield, but also they have other things going on for them. For example, the Luigi is an all-around character, so he can pass pretty well, he is pretty speedy. Then the Waluigi has a good amount of speed and a fair amount of strength, and the Daisy has a lot of strength. So not only these builds do a similar job to what a maximum technique Rosalina will do or a maximum shooting Rosalina would do, but they also are not worthless on defense and can also assist other characters pretty well. So no, I don't think technical strikers are dead in this game. They are worse than what they were before, but just by getting their shooting stat to 14, which is not really that high, you can make them pretty good strikers from out far. And the good thing about 14 shooting is that with characters like Daisy and Luigi, you are able to get there just by equipping 2 gears that boost your shooting. I even played this quick game against bots with this 14 shooting 18 technique Daisy that doesn't even have like a complete set of gear, just have 2 items that boost your shooting, and she did quite well, as you can see. So if you want to have a technical striker, I will suggest that you up his shooting first to 14 and then invest everything on technique if you want to have someone like that. Now, we've seen that 14 shooting is pretty good at scoring goals from out far, and that it actually saves technical strikers and helps them do a pretty good job. Now, I want to answer the question, is the shooting stat capped between 13 and 14 shooting? To test how good high technique and 13 shooting is, I'm going to be using this Waluigi, then this Daisy that I suggest not to try in my best Daisy build videos, and this Luigi, which is also an all-around character but is more all-around than last time. So yeah. So let's start the test with the 13 shooting 19 technique Luigi. I would say that he did get some shots on the net, but it was way less than what the 14 shooting did. He did 11 out of 44 shots into the net from a far range. That is almost at 10% less to what the 14 shooting did. And it is quite a big jump. Like, I would argue that you can get away with 35% of your shots made into the net, but you cannot really get away with 25% of your shots into the net. And I know that Luigi didn't do 35% of his shots, he did 32, but I generally believe that was an unlucky test, and he does way more than what that test would suggest. Also, it's worth mentioning that I don't really have gameplay footage, in an actual game. I didn't really try the 13 shooting builds, but they did significantly worse in the general test. So, yeah, I think there's a big jump between 13 and 14 shooting. Now let's move to Waluigi. And it's a very similar story to what happened with Luigi. I don't have real gameplay footage, I just have the test that we did. But in this test, he also did significantly worse than the 14 shooting build. He did 11 out of 48 shots from a far range, and that is 22% of long-range shots made into the net, which is, not good. And also is a big jump between the 13 shooting and 14 shooting Waluigi build. And lastly, we got the 13 shooting Daisy. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, and because this build actually did more goals than what I was expecting, she was the best she had the best performance out of the other two 13 shooting builds. And I bet that is because she has a little bit of a higher technique. She has 21 instead of 19. But even then, she didn't perform quite well as her 14 shooting counterpart. She basically ended up doing 30% of her shots into the net because she made 15 out of 48. But yeah, I think this one might have been a lucky game or something. But still, she performed worse, like 8% worse than the 14 shooting one. So even though this Daisy is a better striker on paper because she has 13 shooting and 21 technique, that in total is 34 of shooting potential, basically. And her other counterpart, the 14 shooting, 19 technique one, only has 33, in total of shooting potential. The 13 shooting one is actually worse than the 14 shooting one. And it is by a lot. It's from like 8%, which, is almost 10%. And which is what I was saying before, that the 13 shooting builds did like around 10% less of their shots than the 14 shooting ones. And something that supports this theory of shooting being capped between 13 and 14 shooting even more is the fact that in Tones Balloon's video of the best Daisy builds is that his striker Daisy build had exactly 13 shooting and 24 technique. And in that exact same video, he was not getting any shots from out far with that Daisy, which, from what we've seen so far in this video, it's understandable, right? Because 13 shooting with high technique can get eventually some shots from out far, but it's not really very consistent, as it would have been if his build at least had 14 shooting. So now, as a conclusion, I can say that technical strikers are for sure not as good as before, but if you get them to 14 shooting and high technique, you can still make them work. I will be leaving some builds of 14 shooting and high technique on screen to just show you that it's very easy to get to 14 shooting when you have 10 shooting as a base stat. This information is very helpful when you are doing builds, especially for Daisy and Luigi, who are characters that in my opinion are supposed to be strikers, but since that first update are not really good strikers. And is also good information if you are a psycho and you want to use Waluigi or Peach as strikers too. And to answer the question that is it shooting capped between 13 and 14 shooting, I would say that yes, there is a big jump between have a character that has 13 shooting and 14 shooting and both have high technique, because there will be a difference of around 10% of shots made into the net from a far range. Thanks for watching, bye.